Okay. Hello, everybody. We are just waiting a couple of minutes for everybody to join. And I hope that you are all excited to learn more about best practices for communicating all sorts of things for your brands. All right. I think we can start. What do you think, Josh? Should we start?
Let's get into it.
Let's do it. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. I am super excited that you're all here with us. My name is Susanne. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Citruslabs, and I am joined today by Josh. He's the founder and CEO of Bird Hill. All right, so for today, we have content to share with you. So this webinar is all about how to bring your brands to life with visually beautiful content, how this content can help you with storytelling, and also how this content can help you bring your clinical study results to life. For your questions at the end, please put them into the Q&A field on Zoom, or you can also put them on the chat. And before we start, I quickly want to introduce you to Citruslabs. Citruslabs is the fastest growing provider of clinical studies for brands. We work with a lot of brands in the health and wellness industry and cover cosmetics, supplements, superfood, also devices. And we work with world-class brands such as Hum Nutrition, Say Beauty, Your Super, and A System. And our mission really is to elevate brands with affordable clinical studies to then create research-backed product claims that hopefully drive business growth. And typically, our clients see increased website conversions, ad conversions, and retail listings after publishing study results. And we conduct studies from start to finish. Brands typically outsource the entire study to us, and we customize each study to the brand specific goals, which are typically very specific claims, and the data and everything that includes, including your clinical study report, and obviously the claims, they are actually owned by you, the brand. And typically our studies involve questionnaires, but they can also involve biomarkers like blood work, skin markers. We can also involve digital markers like weight, blood pressure, sleep, and can also do before and after photos. All right, that's enough about us, about Citruslabs. Josh, tell us more about Bird Hill.
Yeah, as Susanne mentioned, I'm founder and CEO of Bird Hill, and really happy to be here with Susanne. A little bit about Bird Hill is we're a content studio for CPG brands, a lot of overlap in terms of wellness and beauty, supplements, and we also work in food and snack and beverage as well. So if we want to move on to the next slide, similarly to how I mentioned, photos and videos for fast-growing CPG brands. And here are some of the photos that we've created. And a big idea of this is that we're a partner of the brands that we're working with. And when I say that, kind of how this looks is we're creating content that goes across multiple different brand channels. So before we start working with the brand, we're really trying to understand why we're here, kind of the main reasons for why we're creating. And an example being is an asset that we create starts as a digital ad, and then someone may go to social media and kind of see this is more of what the brand's about. And then also the content living on the website. So really trying to make it full circle in creating for different brand platforms as well. And how we go about doing content is we create on a consistent monthly basis. So each month we meet once a month to look ahead to see what the kind of what the most important agenda is, where the priorities are, what we're going to be creating. Our team then leads it and makes a shot list. So we detail all of the specific products, backgrounds, props, models. We then create, and then it's all implemented. And our team only handles the creative side. So we're not running ads and we're not making websites, but we're working really closely both with the internal team of the brand and also other partners that are handling the implementation, just because it's extremely important. And lastly, great brands tell stories, and we play the visual role in this. So it's not to say that we create brands or we're the reason that brands are succeeding, but we play the visual part. And in 2023, there's so many different ways that photos and videos are used to build a brand, and we're excited to help with that mission.
Let me quickly unmute myself. That's awesome. Now, today, obviously, we want to chat a little bit about, storytelling and how to bring, products to life, how to bring brands to life, and also how to bring clinical study results to life. And, in terms of storytelling, obviously, you at Bird Hill, you are telling a story with the help of amazing visuals. And most people, including myself, I'm thinking about something written when I think about storytelling, and how can visuals, and in particular photos, but also videos, actually tell a story, and how do you actually do that?
Yeah, and in terms of, it's interesting because we both work on quite different sides of the brand, and they're both important. But when kind of building a product, there's so many key parts of it and key benefits, but when it comes to kind of telling that story side of it, a lot of people are really believing with their eyes and kind of creating this idea with how they feel. And with photos and videos too, there's so many parts that can be shown, kind of the show don't tell aspect of the brand. So that's kind of the main part that we try to convey, is that so much of people are buying with their eyes, and kind of seeing something within 3 seconds, 5 seconds, and wanting to learn more. And people are able to see something and make an idea more quickly in some ways than being able to read about the nutrition facts or read kind of more about the brand. But it's the hook to getting them into learning really more about what the brand is.
Yeah, definitely agree. Believing with their eyes, right? I also think it's reverting back to clinical studies. Oftentimes, clinical studies, obviously, when we deliver results, everything is fairly dry, right? You have the data, the hard facts. This is how the product performed. These are your results. These are your claims. Done, right? But then, it really takes kind of a village to really translate this data into actionable, visuals to actually really showcase results, and I think also showcase what your product can do, right? If you have a really awesome green drink, for example, right, or a really great smoothie or a great supplement that has a ton of vitamin C in it, what we see here also in this slide, right? Having a cool pineapple, for example, or some citrus fruit, I think really helps to also bring the content also of the product across, right?
Totally. No, and it does take a village. I mean, it takes much more than both Bird Hill and Citruslabs as partners to do this, but it's kind of, if you don't have one, the other is going to fall a little bit short as well. Or in terms of kind of really generating that mission and that goal of building a brand. So to your point, it's a lot of the clinical studies that are done, they serve a really important part, but if for a lot of people, they don't understand some of these microbiomes and different terms that are used, but when they understand, it helps my stomach, it's a little bit easier to digest. No pun intended.
Yeah, no pun intended. Having a
Yeah.
nice photo of someone with a nice stomach, right?
Right. Totally.
And in terms of KPIs, because obviously, that is super important, right? What should a brand measure in order to tell if a photo or video campaign is actually successful?
Yeah, no, that question is the magic question that we're always trying to understand too. And how I like to think of it is like really does depend on what the goal is. So let's say the goal is to have better conversions on ads, then there's a really clear way to test that, fortunately, in this day and age of running A/B testing. So kind of testing a specific photo with the same copy and a different photo with the same, or a different photo with the same copy, and being able to see how well something's performing. That's a very concrete example of being able to see whether a photo or video is performing well. There's the other side of it too that is less trackable. So when in the whole brand building game, it's not all how are we going to generate more sales tomorrow, but how are we going to build a community? How are we going to build a following? How are people who have already bought in products going to continue to stay engaged and interested? And that's a little bit less quantifiable, but it's an equally important part, just because you can't only think about tomorrow, but really thinking about how content is continuing to build the brand, tell the story, evolve the brand, and all that stuff too.
Yeah, content is a marathon, right? Not a sprint.
Yeah, no, I think that's a good way of thinking about it. And we work with our brands on the monthly basis, and the big part of that is because we saw early on when we were just doing projects that, you know, we would create something and then there would be kind of this lull. And, you know, right now, whether you're launching new products or you're running new campaigns or something's moving kind of pretty consistently. And I imagine on your end too, where it's like someone comes in with an idea of what they want to do a clinical trial on or study, and then I could see it going in so many different ways. Do you feel like that's often true on your end too?
Yeah, yeah. I also think that specifically with showcasing clinical trial results, right? Typically, you would put it on a website and then have your claims there. But the claims are typically, displayed next to a product. A few of our companies, of our brands, actually use visuals, like Bertel's creating them and then adding, the actual results in there. And these are also interesting enough, the brands that then use the results for ads, right? And really showcasing, really helping to push on business growth with their results. And I think this is what you want, right? If you invested in a clinical study, then you want to extend your investment, right? And make sure that you actually get an ROI of that as well, and not just put the results somewhere hidden, most of the time, somewhere hidden on your website, right? You really want to showcase, it should be front and center, that we did a clinical study, our product actually works. These are the results. And I think what you mentioned with measuring results with A/B testing specific photos, different photos, same copy, and seeing if basically a campaign works or not. I know that community following basically product sales is hard to track, and it's hard to nail down on that one variable, right? But what would you say in terms of community? What are the good KPIs to follow and to track? Is it to see maybe email open rates? Is it increased followers on
Yeah.
social media?
Yeah. So there's no one way to track the more community standpoint. Something that I've been thinking more about too and we learned so much just from the brands that we're working with, and it does depend on how many resources you have, how many team members you have, but is really trying to focus on one or two community elements. So rather than trying to, in 2023, trying to figure out TikTok, trying to figure out Facebook groups, trying to understand how to build your Instagram, is leaning into one or two that you feel like you have traction on, or that your brand has relevance in. I'm sure TikTok for everyone kind of continues to come up where it's like, how do we use this? And rather than it just being another thing to use, is almost asking the question of, one, do we think this medium, whether it's TikTok, whether it's Instagram, Facebook, email, does this fit our demographic? Is this where they're living, where they're existing? And then also asking the question of, do we have the bandwidth to really make a mark here? Because rather than jumping into 10 different new community kind of strategies and ways of going about it, is trying to get really good and curious and understand and ask questions about a couple different platforms, and building there. Just because if you can build a bunch of traction on a couple, it's a lot easier to kind of move this momentum to another platform. But if you feel like you're just drowning in all these different places and you don't exactly have a footing, it's going to kind of be a continuous trying to catch air without feeling like you're getting somewhere. My last thing on that is like, you are interacting with people, so they're not just followers. And within that, it's like, by having, real interactions, and whether it's people commenting or people engaging, it starts to seem a lot more real, and you have a better understanding of where these people are and what they're saying to you, opposed to just kind of spraying out to all these people and hoping that something's going to go viral.
So what I'm hearing is that brands should really go niche, right? Instead of trying to cater to all. And it can be like, going niche can be scary, right? Because you might even have, investors, you might have venture capitalists breathing down your neck, telling you to grow faster.
Yeah.
And then, you're basically telling them that, well, my niche for this year is like this specific group. So I am, on mental health TikTok, or, I am on skincare TikTok, right? So this is the group that I'm going after, and then really nailing also visually what these people want to see, and probably also figuring out which visuals, which colors, which models work the best for this particular group, right?
Totally. And I think it starts a little bit with asking those questions of, where do we think that most of our community is existing and living, and where do we think that we can get traction? Because if not, and you're just asking the question, like, why aren't we gaining more followers? There's often more nuance to that, of like, why do we even want followers? That's the other question of that. Or like, do we think maybe our community is more on TikTok, or is on even a more specific niche within TikTok? And you learn, it's like, if you try something and you think that, TikTok is going to be the place, or Instagram may be the place, and then you test it out and it's not clicking, at least and at least you came in with a hypothesis, you had this idea. And if you learn and kind of put it through the test, you see that something doesn't work, and you can kind of move to the next. But if you're spreading yourself way too thin, it's tough to even judge, like, are we not meant for here, or did we just spread ourselves too thin and not put our best foot forward?
Yeah. And I feel like specifically for some, smaller brands, I sometimes feel like content is kind of or especially also like visual content is kind of the unloved child that you have to do, right? You have to post nice photos, and then you have to also keep up not only the photos and potentially videos on your website, you also have to keep up with photos, videos, and constantly new visually appealing content on social media. And how can you actually determine the best type of content, and also the best type of content creator for brands' needs?
Yeah. So I guess it's kind of two parts to this, of like, how to go about the strategy side of like, what are we doing? And then also, how do we actually get it done? And I'll start kind of on the first point of the different types of content to kind of be posting. And usually there's a balance. So both the balance on specifically what you're saying about the brand. So talking about the ingredients, or not talking, showing ingredients, showing really specifically what your product is, what's in it, how it looks, your packaging, your labeling. Additionally, there's use cases. So in this instance, for Garden of Life, this is a probiotic for women, but how is it being used? You know, it's on the go. It's a convenient product that can be thrown in a bag. Different instances of where people are using it. That's an important part too. And then a third, and there's many more parts to kind of show about the brand, but also just what's the feeling that it's creating? So showing how people's reactions are with the product. And this is kind of giving this idea of what the product does to you as a consumer. And then just one more note on this too is at Bird Hill, we create more of the polished type of content, both studio and lifestyle, but there's the other side, which is user-generated content. So this is, different people individually posting with their phone. And you see this a lot on TikTok, and you see reviews, and you see it on Instagram, but rather than it being, more polished and so product focused, it's real people kind of telling their story through videos and photos. And that's an important piece kind of to this content puzzle as well. Susanne, that was kind of on the first part of the question of kind of the formula or the content machine.
Yeah.
And then the second part being is like, how do you go about getting all of this for, in this instance, an employee versus an agency. And there are some other ways beyond just these two, but as a brand, and this isn't just for content, this of course applies to so many other marketing and just other parts of the business. But in terms of the employee side, by having a full-time employee who is focusing on your brand, the benefits of it are that you have kind of the word control feels controlling, but you do have a lot of authority and decision, and you have their whole time, you have their whole schedule. You kind of dictate what's happening and what they're doing specifically, which can be a benefit because sometimes hand-holding and kind of showing them exactly all of the things that need to be done can be helpful. A challenge with an employee is that you kind of in the same vein, or the same benefit can be the same challenge, which you really do have to manage them. You have to show them the ins and outs. You have to give them more of an idea of what you're looking for. And then also they are just one person. So regardless of how talented they are, usually one person is really good at a couple things, but can't kind of do the full suite. And then leaning back into the agency side or studio, on this side, it's, they're not full-time working for you, but the benefit is that, studio like us, we're doing this day in and day out, and we're doing it for multiple different brands. So we're able to kind of see what's working, what's clicking, and we're really leading the show, and kind of making these creative decisions. We involve the brand as much as the brand wants throughout the process, but we're not expecting creative vision, prop sourcing, shot list, model sourcing, all of these little things that go into creating content. It's something that we're handling. So there's definitely benefit and kind of challenge to both sides between having someone who's full-time in-house versus working with an outside studio, agency, multiple different freelancers. And there's no one size fits all, but just kind of figuring out what works for you as a brand at any given time.
Yeah, I think especially for smaller brands, right? Hiring somebody full-time to create this type of content can be a little daunting, I would say, because you also don't know, does it work? Does it not work? Now I have to hire somebody. And then maybe a couple of months in, I realize that actually I don't need a full-time person working on that. And then I have to break this person's heart by, letting that person go. So at least like from our experience, I think, starting with a studio, an agency, or freelancers, I think to actually, check it out, make sure that the hypothesis that you guys have is actually correct, makes sense. And also, like Josh and his team at Bertel, they also have so much experience, right? And what you mentioned, Josh, exactly what works, what doesn't work, what worked for others, and then have like this really unique experience that others might not have.
Yeah, no, and I think, Suzanne, I imagine you experienced this in certain ways, right? I could imagine we certainly do too. It's like we hire outside studio or agencies, and we have a financial team that handles some different elements for us. And a benefit of it is you do learn so much by working with others who kind of, this is all they do and they're experts in this specific field, rather than having to create the entire blueprint for hiring a
Yeah.
full-time CFO or hiring a full-time content creator. It's kind of a similar idea where you learn from experts. And then if you ever do have the bandwidth to make like a full creative team in-house, there can be benefits to that too, but it takes a lot more time.
Definitely.
And
it is more than just taking good photos, right?
Yeah, no, I mean, initially when I got into this, it was just about how to make products look sexy and look really cool. And that was some years ago. And then as time went on, there's so much more that kind of goes into it to get long-term returns.
Yeah. And you mentioned, typically there's a whole creative team behind it, right? You mentioned scouting models, for example, right? And we see that at Citruslabs, we see that a lot as well, that, we talk to potential clients and they say, well, we just hired the scientist. Amazing. We can support that scientist. Well, let's see if the scientist can actually do that themselves. And then typically we always get a call a couple of months in asking for help. Because also in clinical trials, right, it's like creating the material and creating a protocol and doing all of that. It's just like one little part, right? The big chunk is the actual execution. And it sounds like super easy, but in fact, there's like a lot of stuff that goes in it. And at least for us, most companies actually fail with a good recruitment process and retention process, and first recruiting participants, then keeping participants enrolled and actually getting data back from participants. So I assume that Josh, you guys probably see similar things happening.
Yeah, well, I can't even imagine, like, I feel like similar to what you're saying, there are so many pieces that go into creating content on your side. So much, there's certain questions that come to mind that feel like dumb questions of, all the different labs and how to keep everything sterile and all these different elements too. But imagine there's, excuse me, so many other parts that I can't even think about that seem like they would be challenging and would come up from a trial and clinical standpoint. And yeah, on our side, there are a lot of little pieces that go into this, and a lot of it now feels a little bit second nature, and we're still always refining our process. But we were recently mapping out like every single step that has to happen for a month of content to be delivered. It's like dozens and dozens, and it just keeps going. But I think similarly, sometimes people think like a photo comes from just shooting it, and if you have a delicious looking something, that it works. But once you get into the weeds and get through it, there's a lot of little pieces that I'm happy to know now, but would also, like, when I think about how long some of this takes to put together, it's a process. It's a process.
Yeah, definitely. And then it also goes into your brand identity and also brand your reputation, right? Because as you mentioned, like right at the beginning, is that we buy with our eyes, right? If I see something that has these super bright colors and it basically screams at me, this is a great product. It is friendly, right? It is probably working because it is called something with elderberry, and it has an elderberry color in it. So I should probably buy it.
Yeah. Um, yeah. And there's something too about kind of that balance of credibility and thinking that this product has all of the scientific, really important parts and actually benefits you. But to your point, people kind of buy with their eyes. And then the other part, which is a little bit more on our side of how do we make this feel like it's a part of someone's life, or it feels incorporated, or even just feels like it tastes delicious. I mean, there's just different parts to it. And as I mentioned kind of earlier, it takes both sides of like really making sure that the product is legitimate and has all the benefits. And I don't have to worry about that, fortunately. But what we do have to kind of think about are all of the other parts to show to the everyday consumer who's less informed and doesn't know all of
Mm.
the ins and outs of what goes into a product or what's the benefits are, and how can we make this interesting, attractive, something that they want to incorporate into their everyday.
Yeah. And obviously you are creating really amazing content. You want to talk a little bit about, different categories you are doing. I see here, a model. Previously, we saw a dog model. I'm really excited about.
Yeah. I guess are there any categories specific from snack to beverage to wellness that you would be more interested in hearing about,
I
Suzanne?
Yeah, I think probably also most of the audience is interested in health wellness. We talked previously also about Garden of Life.
Yeah, Garden of Life's an interesting example for us, where in no Garden of Life on this slide, but we saw some previously. And Garden of Life's a big legacy. They're an older brand. And when we first started working with them in 2022, they're really trying to lean into a younger audience. And I joked with the individual who we work with, Michael, that my parents have been using Garden of Life forever, but I've never used it, any of their products. And a big focus is how to captivate that younger audience, which may be really different than a lot of the brands that are here, because we work with a lot of really young brands as well. But with Garden of Life, a big idea was how to create content that does reach, the younger audience, but also still stays true to who the brand is and doesn't deviate too far. And it's been really fun to kind of see how the content that we've created is incorporated both into email, social, ads. Kind of fun when I'm like scrolling through my computer, Google, Instagram. It's like, we took that photo or a video that, kind of we saw, but it does feel very full circle to kind of start working with the brand, understand what the goal is. And usually there's a couple, and we kind of see the benefits in different ways. But initially, when we start working with the brand, there's a couple key variables or key things that really want to be accomplished through this. So maybe we want consistent social media posts, and how can we achieve that? And also we need to always be updating our product pages, or ads are really important. We need to start, spending more money on ads, and we need better creative. And it's fun for us to kind of understand what the really key goals are from a content standpoint, and then how can we achieve that. And they do range, like again, Garden of Life has their goal isn't necessarily how can we make more money today on ads, but really building a brand for the long haul with integrating both the younger and the older audience. And it's fun. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that's probably also a big, difference, and also what difference makes, because the Garden of Life is a legacy brand, and they make really good products, really good supplements. But yeah, I agree, it's not a hip brand. So with the right content, with the right colors, with the right visual story, right? They cater more than to a younger audience. And we talked already a little bit about it as, you know, younger people, us included, um, we like social media, right? And we do a lot of buying decisions also on social media. And how can we actually, and this is the last question, how can we actually make sure that, you know, we have consistency across all of the different channels, from website to ads, to the actual, you know, TikTok pages, Instagram pages, without actually reposting the same content over and over again?
Yeah. One part of it is you do have to have enough content. That's like the really simple answer is you
Mm-hmm.
need some content bank. And if your content bank has 3 photos that you're continuously reusing, you're not going to have much ability to share different stuff. But it's not just about having a variety. It is about being cohesive and consistent. And what we always say is like, we want to help build a brand through images and be cohesive, but we don't want it to be formulaic. So by showing the exact same thing every single time and not having some variety and some spice, it starts to feel really flat and people get fatigued by seeing it. But something that is important, and Obvi is a supplement brand that we've been working with forever now. I say forever because they were one of the first brands we ever worked with. And even in these 3 instances, there's difference in them, but they all have this feeling of, it's a very pink brand. They lean into both color and flavor, and even, you know, when working with models, focusing on bright pink poppy. And that's not always the case for many brands. Have a completely different look and
Mm-hmm.
style, but something that is key is having some level of consistency with whatever angle style you're going for, which should be based around your demographic. So it's not just making this up based on this looks fun, but thinking about who's seeing this, who are you targeting, and creating from that angle.
And you said you need enough content. How much is enough?
Yeah. So that always comes back to where it's going to be going. And to make this, to answer this kind of in simplest terms is, if let's say you wanted to post on Instagram 3 times a week, you know, how many how many posts do you need in a month? And then thinking
Mm-hmm.
about it from that angle. And of course it gets more nuanced than that. And there's so many places where content's going, but before thinking about how much content, thinking about the why, kind of breaking it down. These are all the places that we're going to need it for. How can we reuse certain assets? So that's something that we like to think about a lot when we're creating, is where are all the different places that this specific photo or this specific video can go. You get more of an ROI if you can, you know, use something as an ad, but is also on your product page. And I don't mean to contradict the part of like, you don't want to reuse the exact same image everywhere, but there are instances where something can be used and then for, let's say, an ad, but then you also want to add copy to it. As I'm sure many people have seen, like you do get targeted similar images, and you've seen kind of the same image a couple times, whether it's on a billboard or on your Instagram or wherever it may be. So it's okay to lean into what's working and to kind of recycle certain imagery, but you also want to make sure you have enough that it's not just being the exact same thing every single time.
That makes a ton of sense. And you know, that was the presentation part. And thank you so much, Josh. That was really, really insightful. I learned so much about visual storytelling, and the images that you guys at Bird Hill are creating are really just beautiful. And let's see if our audience actually has some questions. Okay. So one question is it okay or better to create different content to appeal to various age groups on different platforms, or just target one audience across all platforms, chosen for that demographic?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think it can you can go about it you can go about it in both ways of what is it better to Suzanne, do you mind restating that question? I think I have it just a little bit jumbled on my end.
Of course, yeah. So is it okay to create different content to appeal to various age groups on different platforms, or just target one audience then across all platforms?
Yeah, I would I do think it's a little bit of a tricky question, but I would say leaning into one audience on multiple different platforms. I think that way, in terms of the content that you're creating, let's say you're leaning into women between the ages of 40 and 50, is by creating content more easily can it be reused and recycled across multiple different brand platforms if you're targeting a specific demographic, opposed to if you're targeting a bunch of different demographics, you're going to have to be creating all different types of content for them. So I think leaning more so into the person who is your demographic opposed to the platform is going to make the process a little bit more seamless.
That makes sense. And then, from your experience, do photos with models typically convert better, or photos without models, or does that also depend?
Yeah, no, that very much depends. And what's interesting too is like within models, sometimes what we'll often want to do is humanize a product. So that doesn't
Mhm.
always mean there's a model that's holding it. Sometimes that means there's a product on a bedside table, or it's simply just a hand that is incorporating with the product. So it's not to say like model photos perform this way and non-model photos perform another way. But what is important is making the product feel relatable, making it feel like this is something that someone would actually use. And there's no one size fits all, but I think the common theme or thread throughout is how can this kind of pull someone in, and how can it make them continuously interested and eventually think, maybe this is something that I would want to use or I would want to keep trying.
And with that in mind, you mentioned earlier user-generated content. So how does that work? Does the brand has some form of authority around what the content should be, or and also in terms of conversions, user-generated content, how does that typically convert versus non-user generated content?
Yeah. On the first part of like, how does a brand source this and come up with it and decide kind of what's being said, is there's a lot of different methods to get user generated content. We don't work within the user generated content space, but there's different ways of sending people product for free and having them do a review. There's different services that also help facilitate this, but whether it's influencers, whether it's actual customers, it can even be something as like when someone buys your product, if they leave a review, they get a coupon off on their next purchase. So there's a lot of different ways to get user generated content. In terms of the conversion of like, how does it convert compared to more of the polished content that we're creating? And I hate to say this as well, but like it really does depends on the platform. What we've seen is like on websites, you want really clean, clear, appealing images of your product. Whereas if you're scrolling on Instagram, someone's really candid reaction to a product may be something that pulls you in more so than someone using the product or a delicious image or something that feels captivating. So it's a little bit of where is the piece of content being used. But what we've seen is that, yeah, user generated can be great for both ads and social media. But when it comes to website, people want something that feels very clean, clear, and appealing as well.
Great. The answer that depends just, showcases that all what you do is customized, right? And there's no
Yeah.
one size fits all. And every brand and every visual should, should basically be tied towards the one brand's identity.
Yeah, and we're on our end, like we're in the creative space. It's less quantitative necessary. It's less quantitative, more qualitative compared to, what something like a clinical trial where you can see really hard numbers. But what makes it interesting on our end is trying to turn the qualitative into something that is more trackable. And the only way for us to do it is kind of to test it out. And we have a hypothesis of this is the type of content that will really click with the brand's community, the brand's customers, and on our end, the benefit of being able to continuously work with the brands is we can see and be like, this has been performing really well. Let's lean more into this and these concepts. And perhaps this other element that we've been testing and trying to create content around is not working as well. Let's lean away from that. So it's trying to make it's more than just creating stuff that looks good, because that doesn't drive a brand necessarily.
Oh, absolutely. I absolutely agree here. And Josh, if people want to get in touch with you, how should they reach out?
Yeah, if anyone's just curious and wants to talk, I'm always happy to chat, and we can set up a time. My email is just josh@birdhill.com. But if you're looking to work with us and to communicate with us, our website, birdhill.com, has a contact page, and we'll happily correspond via email. And if we see fit, and if you're interested in more, we can jump on a call and just see, would this make sense? Our website gives a decent sense of what we do and kind of how we create, but you end up working with people, which is our team. So if this is something that you're a little bit more serious about, would love to jump on a call.
Awesome. And you can reach out to Citruslabs on citruslabs.com, or by sending an email to either hello@citruslabs.com or to Susanne@citruslabs.com. Please note that my name is spelled Susanne @citruslabs.com. And thank you, everybody, for attending. Our next webinar will be again with Bustos Law Group on March 23rd. And in the next webinar, we will talk about FDA regulation, and specifically going into more detail for cosmetic product claims and what you can and can't do in terms of product claims when you're cosmetic. Well, thank you so much, everybody, and see you next time.